In January 2014, a shocking crime occurred in Brookhaven, Georgia. The body of 18-year-old Heather Malone was found in the living room of a quiet home. The investigation quickly revealed shocking truths about her obsessive relationship with Nathan Ellis, her once-admired high school basketball coach. It all began in the fall of 2013 at Brookhaven High School, and from there, a series of events revolving around jealousy and betrayal led to one night of ultimate tragedy. Nathan Ellis, 28, was once the ideal role model for everyone. He was attractive and had a natural ability to communicate, making him the perfect basketball coach at Brookhaven. His players respected his talent and loved how he genuinely cared about their development, both on and off the court. To them, Nathan was a teacher and an admirable mentor. Nathan's personal life seemed to be as fulfilling as his career. On April 14, 2012, he and Hannah, his college sweetheart, exchanged vows in a dreamy wedding. Hannah was a gentle kindergarten teacher known throughout town for her love of children. After their wedding, they moved into a cozy 3-bedroom house on the edge of Brookhaven. It was small but filled with the warmth of family, a place with enough space for future children, a spacious backyard for swings, and the loving life they had always dreamed of. For Nathan, married life was both sweet and challenging. His new job required more responsibility, and Hannah needed him more than ever. Balancing career and family becomes a complex problem that he never expected would push him into a dangerous spiral where love, ambition, and tragedy intersect in ways no one could have predicted. Hannah has always been Nathan's rock. She wants him to pursue his passion for coaching with all his heart and constantly encourages him to give his all in his career. But she also reassures him that they will always make time for each other no matter how busy they get. Their weekends are filled with excitement as they decorate their new home and paint bright visions for the future. Hannah has even started choosing baby names, carefully jotting down each favorite name in a small notebook by her bed, a reminder of the perfect family she's always dreamed of. But while Hannah is immersed in happiness and long-term plans, Heather Malone lives a very different life. At 17, she's the star cheerleader at Brookhaven High School, beautiful, vibrant, and always the center of attention. But behind the radiance is a girl who longs for love and stability. Heather grew up in a broken home where her parents' constant bickering consumed their attention, leaving her alone. When she was 10, her father left, leaving her mother struggling with alcoholism. Their tiny home was rarely neat or peaceful, and Heather quickly learned to fend for herself. The chaos shaped her into a calculating person. She understood the power of beauty and charm and was not afraid to use them to get what she wanted. Despite her popularity at school, Heather was deeply insecure. She craved attention and someone who could see through the mask she wore, someone who could give her the love and validation she never received from her family. And Nathan Ellis, the charismatic new coach, became that person. It started simply enough in September 2012. Nathan had been coaching at Brookhaven for a few months, and Heather would linger after cheerleading practice, standing outside the gym to watch the basketball team. At first, it was a harmless crush. She admired Nathan's confidence and how he commanded his players' respect while remaining approachable. To Heather, Nathan was more than a coach. He was a role model who could pull her away from the life she wanted to escape. For Nathan, Heather's attention was flattering. He was still adjusting to his new dual roles, husband and coach, and the pressure from both sides was starting to weigh on him. Late nights spent analyzing strategies left less and less time for Hannah. Meanwhile, Hannah was drowning in work, managing a classroom full of hyperactive 5-year-olds. Amidst their busy schedules, the distance between them grows ever more expansive, and Heather Malone, with her undisguised admiration, becomes an enchanting distraction. As Heather began showering Nathan with compliments, from his excellent coaching to his charismatic leadership, he felt a sense of validation he hadn't realized he was craving. By October 2012, their interactions became more frequent. Heather would find excuses to chat with Nathan after practice, sometimes to ask for advice about her studies, and sometimes to ask for help with cheerleading. Her attention initially took Nathan aback, but he didn't want to appear cold or rude. The conversation started as casual, light-hearted discussions, but over time, they became more personal. Heather began to open up, discussing her family struggles and feeling abandoned and forgotten. She longed for a better life where she would be loved and cared for. With his mentoring instincts and always wanting to help others, Nathan gradually felt a responsibility to protect this young girl. One evening in late October, after a grueling practice session, Nathan stayed late in the office to finish some paperwork. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It was Heather. She said she had left her phone in the gym and needed to return it. When she entered, she paused for a moment, looked at Nathan, smiled, and thanked him for always being so nice to her. Then she gently told him he was a great coach and an admirable person. "You're the only adult who cares about me?" Nathan paused. He saw before him a young girl struggling to find guidance, but there was something in the way Heather looked at him, in the tone of her voice, that made him feel something he didn't want to admit. At that moment, the line between teacher and student seemed to blur, and despite his hesitation, Nathan didn't stop him. By November 2012, their meetings had become more frequent. They started as casual chats in the gym, but soon turned into private moments in Nathan's office after work. Heather, encouraged by Nathan's initial interest, began testing his boundaries. She dressed more daringly during her workouts, deliberately making herself the center of attention. Nathan began to struggle with guilt. He told himself he was simply a mentor, a support system in Heather's chaotic world. But she wanted more. She craved Nathan's attention, and each time he tried to keep their relationship within professional boundaries, she became increasingly frustrated. Heather began to test him. She lingered after workouts longer, accidentally touched him while talking, and found excuses to text outside of class. She knows how to exploit Nathan's weaknesses and doesn't hesitate to do so. Heather used every tool at her disposal to draw Nathan closer. She knew he was caught between temptation and conscience, and she had no intention of letting him escape. By December 2012, their relationship had entirely crossed the line. Late one evening after a home game, Nathan found himself alone in the gym with Heather. The tension between them had been simmering for a long time, and that night it exploded in the silence, where only the low-ceiling lights hummed softly. Their first intimate moment was a powerful, overwhelming, and unstoppable storm. Nathan was caught up in a mix of desire and guilt. He knew he had made a terrible mistake, but he couldn't deny their intense connection. On the other hand, Heather had no intention of letting him go. From then on, their relationship became a carefully guarded secret. They met secretly late at night in Nathan's office or under the bleachers, only when they were sure no one else was around. Heather maintained a perfect school facade, but her obsession with Nathan grew inside. For Nathan, the relationship became a never-ending internal struggle. He loved his wife. He loathed himself for betraying her. But even though he knew it had to end, he couldn't escape Heather's grip. By January 2013, cracks in their secret began to appear. Heather became increasingly possessive. She texted Nathan late at night, demanding his attention, asking about his marriage, and looking for any sign that he was unhappy with Hannah. In a last-ditch effort to keep his conscience, Nathan tried to back away, but Heather wouldn't let him. This was more than an affair for her. Nathan was her only escape from a life she hated. She will do anything to keep him by her side. Heather's obsession reaches a breaking point when she notices Hannah appearing more and more at games. The way Nathan smiles at his wife and proudly introduces her to the players sends Heather into a fit of intense jealousy. She can't stand Nathan giving Hannah the love and attention she believes she deserves. The stage is set for a confrontation that will change their lives forever. What started as a reckless fling has spiraled into a dangerous, out-of-control relationship. What will Heather do next? And how far will she go to keep Nathan by her side? In July 2013, Nathan and Hannah Ellis still appeared to the outside world as picture-perfect, a young, happy couple with a promising future. Hannah, the anchor of their relationship, exudes charm and positivity. Even though Nathan was busy with his coaching job, she still tried to attend every match, supporting him every moment. Hannah's growing belly symbolized their love and the life they were building together. But behind those smiles and loving gestures, Nathan carried a heavier burden. His relationship with Heather had spiraled out of control. From a mistake in a moment of weakness, it turned into constant fear and anxiety. Heather's obsession no longer stopped at flirtatious messages. Now they turned into desperate pleas, increasingly intense demands. She showed up unexpectedly after practice, waiting for him without reason. Nathan knew that this nightmare could not last forever, but he had no idea that when everything collapsed, the price to pay would be higher than anything he had ever imagined. Heather's eyes burned with rage and longing. Her entire world revolved around Nathan. The obsession consumed her, fueled by the emptiness in her own life. She had no family to turn to, no one to confide in. Her grades were slipping, and her cheerleading practices were erratic. Her coach grew increasingly concerned, but Heather responded with vague excuses, masking the storm brewing inside. And then, on August 14, 2013, everything changed. That day, at a Brookhaven High School game, Hannah showed up unexpectedly. She was wearing a loose-fitting dress that barely hid her growing baby bump. Nathan saw his wife in the stands and couldn't stop the smile that spread across his face. Hannah remained the only beacon of light in Nathan's dark and chaotic world. Heather stood on the sidelines, decked out in her gorgeous cheerleader uniform, but inside she was filled with uncontrollable rage. She couldn't understand. How could Nathan still love his wife after all she'd sacrificed for him? She hated the way his face lit up whenever he looked at Hannah. She hated the way he watched her, even as he coached the game. When the game ended, Hannah approached, gently placed her hand on Nathan's shoulder, and congratulated him. Heather stood in the shadows, her hands clenched, her teeth clenched so hard they ached. And then, like a death blow, the announcement of Hannah's pregnancy was made to the players and their families, calm, casual, but to Heather, it was a stab in the heart. She walked away, stomping out of the gym and slamming the door behind her. Hot tears welled up in her eyes, but not from grief, from anger. For Heather, the baby was the ultimate betrayal, a permanent symbol of Nathan and Hannah's love, a testament to the fact that he had moved on without her. From that moment on, Heather focused on one goal: erasing Hannah. Little did Nathan know, a storm was brewing in Heather's mind. On August 20th, 2013, Nathan decided to end the relationship once and for all. After a late workout, he called Heather into his office. He thought it would be a definitive talk, but he was wrong. Heather wouldn't have it. She begged, threatened, and cried, alternating between professing her love and issuing dire warnings. "If I leave you, I'll regret it." But this time, Nathan was determined. He walked out of the office, leaving Heather's sobs echoing in the empty gym. On November 1st, 2013, Heather's obsession reached a dangerous level. Nathan had cut off contact. He stopped responding to her texts and avoided her whenever possible. The world Heather had so carefully controlled was crumbling, and she couldn't accept it. She had to take back the power. That afternoon, the rain was falling hard. Heather drove to Nathan and Hannah's house. She knew Nathan wasn't there. He was preparing for an upcoming tournament at school. But Nathan wasn't her focus right now. Her target was Hannah. Heather didn't have a plan, just a single determination: to see Hannah, talk to her, or do something. If she could scare Hannah, maybe she would leave Nathan. Or if she found some secret, anything she could use to break them apart. She pulled up in the driveway. Her heart was pounding. The door opened and Hannah appeared with her usual gentle smile. Even though it was raining, she greeted Heather with the warmth of someone who had no idea that a real storm was right in front of her. Heather smiled politely, her tone light as she said she had left her coat in Nathan's car and needed to ask him something. Hannah, unsuspecting, cheerfully invited her in and offered her a glass of water. Heather accepted, but her mind wasn't on the conversation. As she entered the kitchen, her eyes scanned the space, taking in everything. And then she saw it. A cup of tea sat on the counter. Hannah had drunk it earlier while cleaning. The idea struck Heather like a bolt of lightning. She hadn't planned it, but the opportunity was too perfect. Her hands shook as she reached into her pocket for the small bottle of medicine she'd brought along just in case. When Hannah turned to get more water, Heather quickly opened the bottle and poured the deadly liquid into the teacup. Her heart was pounding so hard she could almost hear it echoing. She didn't linger long. Heather thanked Hannah and left the house, her heart pounding as she got into her car. She told herself that the poison was enough to make Hannah sick, just enough to scare her away from Nathan. But deep down, she knew she wanted more. She didn't just want Hannah gone temporarily. She wanted her gone forever. That night, Hannah began to feel unwell. At first, it was just a dull ache in her stomach, but by midnight, it had turned into an unbearable cramping pain. Nathan, panicking, rushed her to the hospital. Concern was written all over his face as the doctors rushed Hannah into the emergency room. But it was too late. Hannah had miscarried. The child they had longed for was gone. Nathan's grief was so deep that he felt like he couldn't breathe. But even as the tears dried, another thought crept into his mind. Why? Something was wrong. He thought back to that morning, to Heather showing up without warning, to the vague unease in his heart. She did something, didn't she? But he had no proof, nothing to convict. When Nathan confronted Heather the next day, she didn't flinch. She looked straight into his eyes, her expression cold and emotionless. "You can't prove anything," she said, her voice soft but menacing. "And you haven't seen what I can do." Nathan backed away, real fear creeping into him for the first time. He knew he had awakened a monster he couldn't control. By January 2014, Nathan, Hannah, and Heather's lives had descended into complete chaos, though the outside world remained oblivious. Heather's obsession was no longer under control. She was no longer the charming, gentle girl Nathan had known. She had become erratic, violent, and out of control. At 18, she no longer saw Nathan as a person but as a possession, a life raft in her shattered world. She hated Hannah. She hated the life they had together. As much as he tried to distance himself from her, Nathan knew she was a real threat. But he didn't tell Hannah the whole truth. He wanted to protect her, keep her from the fear he carried. But the guilt was eating him up from the inside. Nathan became withdrawn and cold. He buried himself in work, taking on extra training sessions and matches to avoid facing reality. Hannah, still recovering from her loss, noticed the distance, but she thought it was the pain, the loss, that had changed him. In early January, she began to find her balance, leaning on her parents and close friends to help her through the pain. Little did she know that the real threat was lurking just outside. Heather will not stop, and the end to this nightmare will be without mercy. Hannah spent her days cleaning the house, trying to find a new beginning. She hoped that the arrival of spring would bring a sense of renewal, a change needed to mend their marriage. She was determined to do whatever it took to get Nathan back, unaware of his true betrayal, or the danger lurking in the shadows. Meanwhile, Heather couldn't let go. The months after the poisoning were filled with anger and despair. She spent hours scrolling through Nathan's social media, analyzing every post and every photo, looking for signs of his happiness with Hannah. Every image of them together was like a knife cutting deep into her heart, fueling a hatred that would never be extinguished. And then, on January 10th, 2014, Heather made a decision. If she couldn't have Nathan, then no one could. On the evening of January 15th, 2014, Heather put her plan into action. She knew Nathan would be away at training and gone all night. Hannah was alone, unprotected. Holding the pistol she had stolen from her stepfather months earlier, Heather drove to the Ellis house. The neighborhood was eerily quiet. The streetlights cast long, silent shadows across the lush lawn. Heather parked a few houses away, then walked the rest. The air was chilly, but her mind was ablaze with chaotic thoughts. What would she say to Hannah? What would she do? Heather wasn't sure. But she knew Hannah had to disappear. Breaking into the house was easier than she thought. The back door was unlocked, a common mistake in small communities where people believed in safety. Inside, the house was warm and quiet, a terrifying contrast to Heather's troubled mind. She strolled through the living room, her eyes drifting to the frames on the mantelpiece. In the pictures of Nathan and Hannah, they were smiling brightly together and looking perfectly happy. She hated it. She didn't have to wait long. At about 8:45 p.m., Hannah returned, her arms full of grocery bags. She was startled to see Heather sitting in the living room, but her polite nature prevented her from reacting harshly. "Hi, Heather," Hannah said, her voice calm but wary. Heather's calm facade quickly cracked, her face twisted in rage. "You ruined my life!" Heather hissed, her eyes blazing. Hannah backed away toward the kitchen, trying to keep her voice even, trying to reason with Heather. But she didn't know that this time, words wouldn't work. Heather pulled a gun from her coat. At that moment, the world froze. Hannah froze. She knew she had to do something. Quickly. She reached for the phone on the counter, pretending to fiddle with it while her fingers deftly dialed 911. She whispered her address. Heather recognized it. Panic set in. She lunged forward, yanking Hannah by the arm and dragging her toward the living room. "Sit down!" she yelled, her voice frantic. Hannah sat down, her heart racing. She tried to stay calm and tried to think of a way to escape. The following minutes felt like hours. Then at 9:03 p.m., police sirens sounded in the distance. Heather froze. Her despair turned to rage. "You called the police?" she roared, her eyes wild. She began pacing the room, brandishing her gun. The Ellis door swung open. Police cars were parked in the driveway. The loudspeaker echoed in the night. "Heather, put down your weapon!" But she didn't hear Heather go too far. In the chaos, she pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, and the bullet whizzed past Hannah's shoulder, sending her to her knees. A sharp pain shot through her body, but Hannah didn't fall. She took advantage of the chaos. With the last of her strength, she dashed behind the couch, hiding in the shadows. Outside, the police were in position. They heard the shots. They didn't wait for them to rush in. Heather screamed hysterically, firing wildly at them. But she didn't have a chance. In a flash, the police responded. The shots rang out decisively. When all was quiet, Heather lay motionless on the floor, blood pooling beneath her body. Finally, the nightmare was over. But for Nathan and Hannah, the scars would last forever. On that tragic night, a police officer fell. He was a 32-year-old father, simply doing his job to protect the community. But at 9:20 p.m., he became another victim of Heather Malone's uncontrollable rampage. Tensions were high. Police stormed the house, guns raised as they ordered Heather to drop her weapon. But she could hear nothing but the pounding of her heart. With a wild look in her eyes, she gripped the gun, firing wildly in a desperate panic. One officer was hit, falling to the floor. Return gunfire rang out quickly, piercing the night. Heather was shot multiple times, her body crumpling to the living room floor and blood splattered on the hardwood floor. The haunting and rage were over in an instant. The events of the night of January 15th, 2014, shocked the Brookhaven community. A quiet neighborhood suddenly became a crime scene, with police cars flashing red lights, illuminating the tragedy that had just occurred. News spread at breakneck speed, and Nathan Ellis's secret was exposed within hours. His affair with Heather had gone from a rumor to a public scandal. Nathan's reputation was in tatters. Parents pulled their children from his basketball team, demanding his resignation. Although Nathan fully cooperated with the investigation and admitted his role in the chain of events that led to the tragedy, the public was unforgiving. He was seen as an accomplice, a man whose weakness had fueled a horrific nightmare. By February 2014, Nathan had resigned, disappearing from public life. No one knew where he was, and no one cared. Hannah survived, but while the wounds on her body may have healed, the pain in her heart will never go away. In March 2014, she left Brookhaven and moved back in with her parents. A few weeks later, she filed for divorce. Nathan's betrayal, combined with the haunting memories of that night, had destroyed their marriage. She could no longer live with someone who had indirectly pushed her to the brink of death. The bright future she had dreamed of was now in pieces. Heather Malone's story quickly became a cautionary tale. The media portrayed her as a troubled young woman, a victim of circumstance, but also the perpetrator of an unimaginable string of violence. Debate raged. Who was to blame? Was this the result of a fragile mind pushed to the limit? Or was it a warning about the broken moral boundaries in the teacher-student relationship? Yet, for those who knew Heather, she remains a vivid example of how obsession, despair, and uncontrolled emotion can lead to tragedy. The Ellis's home, once filled with love and hope, has been empty for months. Brookhaven is finally returning to normal, but the memories of that night remain a chilling reminder of how love, betrayal, and obsession can destroy everything. The stories of Nathan, Hannah, and Heather will forever be a testament to the terrible consequences of secrets, lies, and uncontrolled emotions. Stay tuned for more stories that peel back the layers of human behavior, exposing the darkest corners of the human heart. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with our daily stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below.